There we go. And as the lads said, don't forget, as we always do, support new music on MMTV. Check them out, especially when new music sounds as good as that. A massive thank you to Pros for opening this edition of MMTV. And like the lads said, it is really weird at the moment. We would normally have a full studio audience, but obviously with the lockdown and stuff, we are unable to do that. But at least we can still continue bringing you a full show of great Mancunian entertainment. Up next, we say a lot on MMTV about how great the music scene is at the moment, and there's loads of good magazines publicising that fact. The next gentleman we're going to introduce to you is a man who is right at the forefront of that. From the Reet Good magazine, covering loads of great new music, our next guest is Carl Maloney. Carl, how's it going, man?
I'm really good.
Good to see you. Listen, I know that you normally come down to MMTV and you interview
Always.
the fans and all that kind of stuff. Cheers for coming down to tell us
welcome.
all about... Obviously, you're here to tell us about all Mancunians in Manchester that know about Reet Good magazine, or RGM, as we know you.
Yes.
We'll talk about the Yorkshire thing in a minute.
That's fine.
Before we talk about the magazine, though, I want to talk about you, Carl Maloney, and your career. Now, tell us what your early memories of music, growing up, what music were you into as a kid?
God, I started when the baggy Manchester scene all kicked off, really. So I was always a bit of an indie kid, you know, one of those. And you know, I've Oasis, Stone Roses, all the Manchester bands, really. Like, you know, Pulp in Sheffield were just massive influence on what I loved. And
do you know, growing up at that time in Yorkshire, how much of the Manchester scene was obviously spilling over there? Over here, we lived and breathed it. How much of that spill over into Yorkshire?
I'd say massively. It had a massive impact on me and my school. I went to a school called Myrtle Springs in Sheffield, in Gleeglas, and everybody was just part of that scene. I can remember my mate Richard. He brought this tape in with Supersonic on it, and he was just like, "This is like the best thing I've ever heard in my life." And you know, when music just affects you, and it's affected me to this day. But that was like my first memory of just like getting a tune, and just like thinking, "Wow, this is going to change my life," and it did, really.
So you got into music through the Manchester scene, obviously through the Sheffield bands like Pulp and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you formed a band called The Sound, or later became Seven Hills. Tell us about that band. What kind of stuff were you doing? Were it original material, or were you copying what we do in Manchester?
We weren't copying anything at the time. It was 20 years ago when we first started it. I know I don't look old enough.
So you started when you were one?
Like probably like 19. I'm 42 now, so like 18 or something like that, 19. And we started this band, and it was a band created from all my friends in Gleeglas in Sheffield. Somebody messed about with bass, somebody had a drum kit somewhere, and we all got together and just jammed, and we were all good friends, which were nice about being in a band. You don't see that as much these days, but we just wanted to have a good time and play guitars, and I can remember promising my mum that I was going to pay a mortgage off through music. It didn't quite happen.
Have you done it yet?
No, have I? But you know, I've always had that passion and belief that something's going to happen through music. It didn't quite happen by being in a band, but I'm still in the industry and I still love it, and I still like supporting new bands as well.
Now, the one good thing, rumour has it, right, the one good thing about this band that you formed, The Sound, or as it became Seven Hills, there was a certain band from Sheffield that did their first ever gig supporting you, and that was the Arctic Monkeys.
Yes, we played a gig at the Grapes in Sheffield, which is sadly no longer there. And supporting us that night were a band called the Arctic Monkeys. So if anybody's watching this in Sheffield, they'll be like, "Oh God, he's wheeling that story out again." But now I'm in Manchester, I can start telling it to new people again, and I love it.
Well, it's great for us to hear. Now, when you, I'm not going to talk too much about them because obviously we want to know about the magazine. But that night, the Arctic Monkeys did their first ever gig supporting you and your band. Could you tell that night there was something about them, something that were a bit special?
100%. The first time I'd ever seen a band get everybody out of the room for a sound check and be professional. And they were a lot younger than us at the time, and it was just like, what are these up to here? So you could tell straight away they were really professional, and they wanted to get the sound right in this small, dingy little venue in Sheffield. They had that professionalism, if that's a word. Is that how you say it?
You can have it.
So they had that professionalism straight away, and at the time we just thought, what's up with them? They're a bit weird. But looking back, it's just like they just wanted the best sound that they could get and spend that time productively to make sure they sound the best they can be.
And what about on stage? Were they as good on stage as what obviously we know them as now?
You wouldn't really notice, really. It was the first ever gig that they'd done, so you could tell they had decent tunes. It weren't like a magical moment when you thought these guys are going to be like taking over the world. It just weren't like that. We were just in a dingy room. We were probably a bit drunk and all that kind of stuff. So it's all a little bit hazy. Half of Sheffield say they were there at the gig, and there were probably about 18 people. So,
but it's still a great story.
Yeah,
isn't it?
It's a great story, and I'm going to live on it for the rest of my life.
And your story itself, we could go on and on, but we're not going to. I want to flick through it. Obviously, with your band, they continued till 2010. You supported the Inspirals, Milburn, Reverend and the Makers, and then all of a sudden, a little bird tells me you went up to stand-up comedy.
Well, the band broke up. Everybody got boring and started having kids and that kind of stuff. And I just wanted to carry on showing off. So I thought, what else can I do on my own? So I thought, right, I've always thought I'm a bit of a funny kid. It didn't quite turn out that way on stage. I attempted. It's one of them things that I just thought, if I don't do it, then I'm going to regret it. So I thought, I'm going to have a good go at it. Whenever I do anything, I put 100% into it. And I ended up doing about 55 gigs or so that year. Didn't really get on with the comedy scene. It's not communal like the music scene. It's not as friendly and it's not as nice, believe it or not. I weren't very good at it.
You must have done all right, and you must have enjoyed it to do that number of gigs in a year.
Yeah. Well, I had a passion to do it and learn, and it's like anything when you start. You've got to graft and do it. And every now and again, I had a really good gig, and that kept me going. So I did like probably 6 bad ones and 1 good one, 10 bad ones and then 1 good one, and that kept me going with it, really. And it opened up so many opportunities. It opened up the opportunity for me to start hosting gigs and music gigs in Sheffield, really. I became a bit of a compare. A bit like you, mate.
But in Manchester.
Yeah.
No, so do you know what's really good? So you've done all this, you've supported all these bands, you've had your own band, you've done stand-up comedy, and then you make the decision to start helping other bands, and you decide to call it Rate Good Magazine.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that's a proud Yorkshire, that, innit, if I ever heard it.
It's right good. I'm just gonna call it RGM, just so the Manx can say it easy.
Well, I was going to say that over the last period of time, it has become known as RGM.
Yeah.
What made you decide to get involved and do perhaps a magazine to perhaps help other people?
It happened really organically. Basically, I started hosting other people's gigs after doing the comedy, and then I started to do my own gigs in the Frog and Parrot in Sheffield. In those gigs, I used to interview bands and film bands, just like this kind of stuff. And it became a thing called Carl Maloney Presents in Sheffield. When I interviewed the bands, I needed a website to put the band videos on, so that started. The website took off a little bit, so I started doing band reviews and that kind of stuff. So I never set out to start a magazine at all. It just happened organically. And it's grown just through my own, sheer...
Determination.
Determination, that's the word, yeah, determination, just to keep a good thing going, really, because people got on board with it. A lot of people didn't like the fact that we are really honest with his reviews, which I'm proud of, because we don't just offer a blog or a magazine where we'll tell bands that the greatest thing in the world. We'll give them feedback if we feel that's appropriate as well.
I suppose you've had the experience of being in a band and stuff to say, this is what you're doing right, this is what you're doing wrong. So you've got Rate Good Magazine going, or RGM as we know it now. Well, you've been doing that. What would you say have been the highlights of the magazine? The standout points where you can go, yeah, I'm proud of that.
One massive thing that helped me, I started a series driving around in a car interviewing bands, just local bands really. And I asked John McClure on Twitter, I've supported him years ago in bands and that kind of stuff, but I asked him on Twitter if he'd be a guest. And that were and he agreed to it, and it went down really, really well.
Do you know what? I think I remember that, actually. A few years ago, wasn't it? Yeah, I remember that.
And it were a massive catalyst and basically helped me get bigger gigs, bigger guests, really. So I got, Clint Boone in, loads of other people, like quite decent names that I'm proud of that series, and it's really helped the brand RGM grow to what it is today, and just little catalysts like that, really, which make you proud. Now, don't get me wrong, it's hosting a magazine is a lot of work, and I work full time as well, so I do it in my own time on top of it, and it can be a bit of a pain in the arse, but I love it.
Well, it's great what you do, and everybody is aware of RGM and the magazine and what you do. If just go off on a bit of a tangent, you have branched out a bit, and you're now managing a band as well, Sinclair.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about them.
Well, I started putting gigs on at Gulliver's Castle in Manchester. Now I've moved over here a couple of years ago. And they are just a raw, young band that I just saw something in when I had them on a few times at a gig, and I'm just like, yeah. Ollie the singer he's all over. That this is his future. This is what he wants to be. And he asked me to manage him. I'm like, I don't know if I've got time for this, but let's give it a go and see what we can do. And I'm really proud of how the lads we rebranded them. They used to be called Assembly Point. They're called Sinclair now because they had a crap name, but we sorted that out straight away. And we're just working hard behind the scenes. We've just brought a single out yesterday called Burn 'Em Down, and it's a top tune. And I'm just going to work hard with them. You know, you don't get into this game for the money. You do it for the love, and I love the guys, and I just love seeing their new single that came out yesterday out there in the world now, just like doing its own thing.
Well, I know that we are hoping to get Sinclair on the show at some point on MMTV.
Apologies from the lads for not being here tonight.
Well, they will be on one in the future, no doubt
Definitely,
whatsoever. Just out of curiosity, though,
Yeah.
RGM, you're looking after Sinclair. Is that something you're hoping to do more of in the future, manage bands, or is it just a one-off thing with this particular band?
Since I started managing Sinclair, I've been asked by a couple of other bands, and at this moment in time, I'm just sticking with Sinclair purely because I don't want to water down the effect that and the work that I'm doing with them. So maybe if I can time manage a bit better and maybe delegate more work with RGM, that might be a possibility in the future. I'm not closing the door to it. I enjoy it. But at this moment in time, I'm just concentrating on Sinclair and getting them where they need to be.
That's great. So obviously RGM, I'm sure a lot of people who watch MMTV know about RGM, and obviously Sinclair, hopefully it won't be too long before we do have them on MMTV. What does the future hold for RGM? Where do you want to take it? What comes next?
Well, we've just got our first, we've just passed 1 million views on the website, which I'm proud of. Absolutely. 1 million people have been on my website. That's amazing. And I'm really proud of, throughout this whole pandemic, we've brought out new content with bands every day through the pandemic, which that's one of my biggest accomplishments, I think.
I think things like what you're doing with the bands and with RGM, that's what's keeping music lovers going during this awful time. Yeah, and
it's busy. It has been busy through the pandemic, but because I always try and like do a bit of market research and see what other people's doing. I haven't seen anyway another blog, magazine, whatever you want to call it, bring out as much content during the pandemic than what we have. And
as active.
Yeah, that's a major accomplishment for me, because we must have helped hundreds of bands where, you know, they're struggling at the minute, they need help, and some of them are young and they just want to do everything today, and you just have to manage that expectation and just do your best.
And I think on a personal point of view, sounding like yourself as well, one of the things that I really enjoy about MMTV is the fact that you can watch and help these young bands. So is there any bands on you, I'm putting you on the spot here now, is there any bands on the radar at the moment, you know, you're listening to a lot and really digging and enjoying?
Yeah, oh yeah, Sinclair, obviously. A bit cheesy things, I should have said that.
Other than the band you're managing?
Yeah, I love Dirty Laces. I think they're
great band, yeah, good friends of the show.
Yeah, God, I am on the spot here a little bit. I was thinking, it's all gone blank. There's literally loads and loads of them that we're just pushing out there in a minute, and it's just I couldn't give you one or two. You know, Dirty Laces are up there. Scuttlers, love those lads. I saw them down here. One of the MMTV
great band,
ones,
yeah.
Just, you know, great bands. Just go to rgm.press and you'll see all the good stuff that we can do. That's all I'd say.
I was just going to...
answer.
You've just answered my next question there, though. So rgm.press is where people go if they want to find out more. And like you've just heard Carl saying, right through the pandemic, Carl and RGM really have been at the forefront of keeping new music alive. You know, every single day of the week there's new material. So make sure you follow RGM on all the usual social media channels. And, of course, get that 1 million mark up on his website as well.
Let's get 2 million, eh?
Listen, Carl, not on behalf of myself and all of the bands, thank you for everything you do.
Cheers,
and good luck in the future with RGM.
Cheers, mate.
Carl Maloney of
Cheers, guys.
RGM Magazine.
Thank you.